All right, Joel. So the first thing I want to do is just say thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it, and I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for taking interest.
Of course, and I want to start by just asking, when did music become such a huge part of your life that you knew that that was the avenue that you were going to take?
I mean, I grew up around music. My parents were classical musicians, so they had me going on cello at 3 and piano at 7, and I wasn't really into it. I, like a lot of little boys, I was really kind of sports obsessed. I wanted to be a pitcher. That was kind of my initial dream in life. And I'd say right around that time, like it just sort of worked out that all the kids grew and I didn't. And I like when I started high school, I was only 5'4", which I'm 6'3" now. So for perspective, and right around that time, I heard Back in Black, and MTV was just starting. I don't know if you're old enough to remember the early days of MTV, but there was not many videos, and they would just kind of rotate. And every time AC/DC came on, I was like, that dude, I wanted to be Angus Young, which is hilarious because I don't really look anything like Angus Young or even play very much like him. But I think like his energy and that, he exuded just in performing was, to me as a kid, I looked at that and went, that's awesome. And so I went to my parents and asked for a guitar. And luckily, I had a friend who initially they had me playing on my stepmom's acoustic, and I was learning out of like the Alfred Method book, learning the 3 notes on the high E and all that. And I was like, man, I guess at that time I was kind of figuring that like people that were in bands, because, there was no YouTube back then or to really resource. I just thought they were like deities, that somehow they were like some kind of gods that knew how to play this cool music. And but luckily I had a friend and he knew some rock tunes. He like pulled out his electric and started playing like the riff to Crazy Train or whatever. And I was like, how did you learn this? Like, and he said, oh man, you got to go to my teacher. He teaches rock songs. And so I switched over to him, and then my enthusiasm was off the charts like as soon as that started. And yeah, they basically said like, we'll buy you a guitar, but we want to make sure that you're going to stick to it before we buy you an amp. Back then a practice amp was like crate, horrible, just awful sounding practice amps, not at all what it is nowadays. And but he gave me a tip. He goes, well, if you want, you can take a cable and just plug into the auxiliary input of your home stereo. So I remember doing that and taking our home stereo and putting it on 10 and playing like, the riff to Paranoid and stuff like that. And but as far as like when I made a decision, it's almost like it never happened. I just kind of had a lot of enthusiasm for it really early on. I played, uh, knew I wanted to play guitar for a living more than be like a rock star or anything like that. Like, I mean, that still really is in many ways like my primary goal. Like it doesn't have to be like the whole rock thing to make me happy. I'm really, really happy playing guitar, period, and just like playing music. So it kind of came from that place more for me. And then like anything that happened from there was kind of like this big surprise because I can't, we had no money, man. I mean, my parents, we were a very interesting family. I mean, we lived in a very like poor blue collar neighborhood. Because we had no money, but they were very highbrow because they were classical musicians. So that was kind of the way we rolled. But anything that happened, like where I'm from, just seems like, well, no way is that supposed to happen for you. Um, but we had a nice local scene, and considering we were in relatively small suburbs southwest of Chicago, but we did have some people come out of there, like the Disturbed guys came out of there. Danny Donegan was in that initial like local scene with me, and we were playing in different bands, of course, back then. But it's always great like with him. We were tight, but not like we weren't like best friends or anything. But we have a special bond, I think, because of that. We go back to like playing at the same all ages club and stuff like that when we were 15, 16 years old. And so it's great. I'm really happy for Danny. He was always a good guy. even back then. And I'm really happy to see him have the success he's had with that band. He's a great guy.
That's awesome. And I wanted to point out too to my listeners, like I always compare you to a guy like Rudy Sarzo because I feel like you've played with everyone. Like you two guys have just been everywhere, and it's absolutely incredible to see. But before you started, you know, playing, with the Night Rangers and the White Snakes and things like that, how old were you when you got into your first actual like serious band?
I mean, in fairness to Rudy, with that comparison, Rudy, it's not really an accurate one because Rudy really did break with something, with Quiet Riot and of course with Ozzy, and had that really early surge. And yeah, I think, as his career has gone on, he's played with a lot of people, but Rudy has experienced a level in the music business that I never did, really. I mean, I always made my living with guitar. I just did like a couple years after high school, a couple years of community college where classical guitar was like my thing, and I was doing it to kill time. I
Mm.
was like, I want to go to GIT and go out to Hollywood, and I don't even know what I wanted to do. I guess back then the instrumental guitar thing was big, and I kind of had designs on maybe becoming a great guitarist that would be, I don't know, find some acknowledgement or something. But
Hmm.
um, I didn't know anything looking back on it. I mean, I was like only 19 leaving home, going out there. I didn't know anything. I mean, I hadn't done um, even remotely the amount of work in terms of like being a pro that I really needed to do to be ready. At 19, I could shred, and that was kind of like it. And I knew like reading, but I didn't know how to work with people and give
Mm.
people what they wanted, like vibe wise, or how to land a gig or any of that. I had no clue. I just was like, but I worked for a year after GIT at Cherokee Recording Studios out there. I kind of worked up very quickly from runner to tech. I had a friend who was he was my second guitar teacher, TJ Helmrich, and he'd gone to GIT and gotten a job teaching there. So he was kind of like, my mentor at that stage, I would say. And it was like, all right, so he went out there and did all right. So maybe if I go out there, I'll do all right. And then, I was working at Cherokee making minimum wage, and the Rodney King riots happened and everything like that. Things were getting completely insane. And
Mm.
I was sleeping on a floor and riding a bike around LA. I didn't have a car or anything like that. And I was like, maybe I should just go back to Chicago, the area I was from, and gig on weekends with, a bar band and teach guitar. And so that's what I did. I just,
Oh,
went back, and I filled up a roster of like 70 students a week and just started teaching and then gigging on weekends with my own bands. And that kind of like, just kind of, I'd say, as I became, I suppose through TJ, like, one of the big things was having your own thing, like, just do your own thing. Don't be in cover bands and stuff like that. So, as I got a little bit more open-minded into like playing different gigs and playing with other people, that really started to take off. And it just kind of locally there, like my first break was really playing with Kathy Richardson, who sings for Jefferson Starship.
mhm.
She had a great following and her own band in the Chicago area, and that was, I suppose, my initial like taste of some kind of like, people cared who I was or anything like that. And because of that, Jim Peterick lived in the same area, and Jim tended to keep an eye on who was in Kathy's band. Now, Jim Peterick was founded Survivor and the Ides of March. So he wrote
Mm.
Vehicle when he was a young man, I think 18 years old or something like that. And of
Wow.
course, wrote all the Survivor hits. And so Jim had this giant house and had me over to do some sessions and things like that. And that was kind of like, wow, incredible. And then he had this thing called World Stage that he would basically have a lot of classic rock guys come out, and other people. It was a wide variety of music, but do a couple of their hits and maybe something off of their own album. You'd learn like a lot of songs, right? Like
Mhm.
36 songs, but that gave me the opportunity to actually play with a whole lot of people. There's a really long list, like Kevin Cronin from REO Speedwagon, Don Barnes from 38 Special, Rick Emmett from Triumph, Kip Winger, Alan Parsons. It's a
Wow.
very, very long list of people. And this was like a once a year kind of thing.
Mhm.
So one of the people that did it every year was Kelly Kagi from Night Ranger.
Oh,
So
okay. Okay.
I would see Kelly like once a year, and we knew each other for probably 6, 7 years before I even had the opportunity to play with Night Ranger.
Mm.
And I had sort of, so the plot sort of running in a parallel road with that was Kathy Richardson had landed a role as Janis Joplin in a show called Love Janis.
Mm.
And that ran in Chicago without me in the band. And then it was going to New York, and there's a longer subplot to it, but essentially I became the guitarist in the band in New York City. So I went to New York, but continued to fly back and do those Jim Peterick shows. So
Mhm.
Kelly basically, I think, recognized that like here was this guy like getting off the plane, and I would know 36 songs and play down this show on no rehearsal, and just having done my homework. And one of the years, probably around the 6th or 7th year, I learned that Jeff Watson was no longer with Night Ranger. And they said, well, Reb Beach is playing with us for now, but he's going to have to go back to Whitesnake. Hilarious how small the scene is, huh?
Right. Right.
And yeah, I mean it's hilarious. So I ended up kind of saying to Kelly later that night, we were out drinking, and I was like, "Hey man, you should have called me, and I can do the 8 finger thing, and I play a gold top Les Paul, and like I just would have been a good fit with you guys." And like about a week later, I think Reb needed to miss one of their shows that to play with Winger, I
Mm.
believe. He was double booked, and so I think they were looking at like, what do we do? Do we do this with just Brad on guitar? Do we cancel the show? And then Kelly happened to say, probably for me doing the drunken move of putting the cell phone in his face, going, "You should have called me, man." He said, "Well, I know this guy that plays with Jim Peterick, and we wouldn't have to rehearse with him or anything. He'll just learn it and get off the plane." And so that was kind of my audition with Night Ranger, was through all that. I'm sorry for being so long-winded. I have a really long, weird story, but I always made my living doing that. Love Janis show had gone to regional theaters on the road, and I had done that in sit downs in cities. And the same director had a show that was a blues show that I went around with.
Mm.
And so I was playing a lot and making my living. And right after Love Janis closed as well, one of the guys that subbed for me played with the Turtles, and I began subbing for him, Happy Together. And
Mm-hmm.
and the music director was a big brother in the holding company, and they always kind of carry a second guitarist, like where kind of based on geography, like where,
Mm.
whoever was closest could come in and be the second guitarist. So I was gigging a bit with the Turtles and with Big Brother and the holding company. The funniest part about the Turtles is when I first filled in, they really liked me. But the guy who I was filling in for, he was going to stay, but their bass player quit. So they said, "Do you play bass?" And I needed a gig, dude. I had like nothing. When Love Janis closed, like that was all I had in New York. I was doing 8 shows a week with that. That was gone. And I was like, "Well, yeah, I'll play bass for you guys. Absolutely." So I think it was probably about 2 or 3 years of me playing bass for them. Um, Before the guitarist quit basically and left, and I switched over and played guitar for them for a couple of years. And that, yeah, oddly enough, was my transition into Night Ranger. I was doing the Turtles, and went to Night Ranger from there. It
Wow.
was yeah, very, very
Wow.
strange. Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's not the typical story of like, guy who's young grows his hair out, ends up like, it's very different from Rudy Sarzo. Like Rudy had success, like, early on with, I mean, in many ways, Quiet Riot was what began that whole Sunset Strip scene, man.
Yeah.
Like seeing them rise on the charts was what led I think all the record companies to go, let's find the next one. Like,
Hmm.
um, Rudy's a legend. And so, I don't want to necessarily lump myself in with him. He does a lot of different gigs now.
Hmm.
And I've more or less been a guy who just has always worked on guitar and had a lot of gigs. And, I've had some great gigs, but
Well,
yeah.
I gotta say though, because I wanted to ask you about the Turtles specifically, that had to be just cool. Like, just I mean, that name, that band, just Happy Together and all that, and just to jump into that and then go into Night Ranger. Like, I like that you're long-winded because I really want to hear this whole story. So, when you make that transition into Night Ranger, wasn't there also a point where you were filling in Foreigner at the same time?
Yeah, that was so I joined Night Ranger really at the start of 2008. The fill-in show for Reb happened in 2007, and they kind of wrote out what they committed with Reb for that year. That was like the deal. Like, let's play with you in 2007, and then when you have to go back to Whitesnake in 2008,
Hmm.
well, I think they kind of figured this is a good candidate. I came in and did a good job on the fill-in gig or whatever, and um, but yeah, I mean, it was a great experience. All of it was funny to watch. Like when I got out of GIT was right when it became not cool. Like Smells Like Teen Spirit came out and it was like, all right, no more of like the lead guitar thing. Nobody
Hmm.
wanted like technique. So in many ways the best thing to ever happen to me because like gigging with the Turtles and playing bass, I mean that just means like you have to make yourself valuable in ways that are like, hey, this guy's a nice guy, he's on time, he sings backing vocals, things like that to make you valuable,
Yeah.
you couldn't just rely on like, well, check it out, man, I'm going to shred for you a little bit. There was none of that. I mean, there was none of that to rely on. So it was like, how do I make myself valuable in this situation to them?
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it was a great experience. Those guys are great guys and loved my time with them. And I love that my story is so weird. I've got a lot of very um, strange twists and turns along the way, but it's not like some people picture. I think people have often asked, like, like, what did you do before you were in Night Ranger? Because, I mean, it was a long time coming. Like, I mean, by the time I joined Night Ranger, I mean, I was like already 37 years old.
Hmm.
I mean, it was like, yeah, I'd lived a lifetime of like playing music and having experiences already by the time that happened.
Yeah.
And but that was amazing. It was an amazing feeling to join up with those guys. That was really the first time anybody really, really cared. Like, hey, you're a guitar player in a band with a history of great guitarists with Jeff Watson and Brad Gillis, and I'm
Yeah.
always very grateful to those guys. And in many ways, that is where I learned the most in like I don't know, music business sounds so like pretentious or something, but just like what it is, what it is to be a pro and be out there in a band where you have fans and you're scrutinized and things like
Hmm.
that. So, um, very grateful for the 7 years with them and shortly thereafter, they opened up a Broadway show in New York, Rock of Ages.
Hmm.
And because I had kind of stayed active in that scene as well, I had a neighbor who was a pit musician, and I was learning like his scores, and I would sub for him in the pit, like
Oh, okay.
legitimately, like pit music.
Yeah.
And because of that experience, the one of the keyboard players on the last show I subbed from on Tarzan became the music supervisor for Rock of Ages, and he was like, "Oh, I know this guy that subs. That's a rocker guy. He'd be perfect for this, and he
Oh,
knows
wow.
theater and knows how that works." And so I got Rock of Ages. I guess like about maybe not even a full year into having Night Ranger. Like we opened on off Broadway, like shortly thereafter.
Hmm.
And so I kind of had those two things going. And then 2010 was when Alex Skolnick wanted to take a year off from Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
Hmm.
And it was no problem to take off from Rock of Ages. When you work a theater show, you have subs and it's a union gig. Like nobody can really steal your gig. They can't go in and say, I can be here all the time. Like it's
Yeah.
it's your gig and you sub it out, right? So
Hmm.
the trick was at that time was I was like, okay, I've got an offer to do TSO, but I've never subbed out a Night Ranger. And how are they going to take that? Like me saying like I'm not going to be available November, December to you guys. And so to their credit, they were cool about that for the most part. And I mean, it wasn't without some problems, but you know, that's to be expected. I'm not criticizing them, man. You know, anytime somebody's in your band and they're like, "Hey, 2 months out of the year I can't make it," is like not great for them. But um, so I'd go off and do TSO in November, December, and sub out of both, out of Night
Mm.
Ranger and Rock of Ages, and that I'd say that was, you know, when at least in the US. So there's a running theme with all this stuff, and it's very like United States. Like Night Ranger does a lot in the US
Yeah.
and not as much internationally as Whitesnake. And that's kind of right around the time Rock of Ages was the word was kind of looking like, hey, 2014, the show's probably going to close. I mean, it had a great 6 year run. I probably played like, you know, roughly 2,000 shows of that, like
Oh,
a
wow.
lot. And same with that Love Janis show for that matter. I mean, I probably did that ran 2 years in New York and I did it at regional theaters. I probably played like, I don't know, 12, 1,300 shows of that as well.
Oh my God.
So yeah, I mean, I worked hard. Like, I mean, I was always working. It was just kind of a really different path than people would expect. And but you know, Whitesnake that came along when Doug decided to leave, Doug Aldrich. It just seemed like something that would be a good like next step for me is seeing as Whitesnake tours South America and the UK and Europe and Australia. And I thought, you know, it's a great opportunity to work with David Coverdale and
Yeah.
Tommy Aldridge and, you know, legendary guys like that. And Reb Beach for that matter. You could throw Reb in there with that. And it just seemed like a great opportunity. And it's a great catalog of songs, you know.
Yeah.
So it wasn't so much about like being unhappy with Night Ranger. It just kind of seemed like a good opportunity for me. And so that, unfortunately, those two things couldn't coexist. You know, that was like where some things had to change. And that was, you know, that was a difficult process for me because Night Ranger was really the guys in a lot of ways that gave me my start. And, you know, I owe those guys a lot. And it's never a great feeling when you part ways with people you care about. And, but you know, that it just was what it was. It was me just going like, I want to roll the dice and take this opportunity to do this. And, you know, I don't regret it. I think, you know, Night Ranger was something where it's a little bit more like, barring some of the years where there'd be blocks of tours, like 2011 being one where you mentioned me filling in for Foreigner on that tour. Yeah, Mick Jones was sick on that tour, and I filled in for a bit, basically until they found Bruce to come in on guitar, Bruce Watson, who's still with them nowadays. And
Hmm.
yeah, that is what it is, dude. I mean, that was an amazing opportunity to fill in for Mick Jones, and Mick is a legendary guy, and you know, forever grateful to those guys for giving me that opportunity and remain tight with them because of that. I mean, that was trying. It was like 24 hours, man, 24 hours notice on that.
Oh,
And I had to learn
wow.
their set in like a day and be on stage with them. So that was, you know, we've been through the trenches.
That is amazing. That's impressive too. And I just want to backtrack just a little bit because when you mentioned Rock of Ages, I could be wrong about this, but didn't you also have a small part in the movie Rock of Ages? Did you have some kind of cameo or a small role in that?
I did, yeah. That's a story unto itself. So they at the time, you know, you hear, well, they're making a movie. They're making a movie. Okay, great. And as it stands, I'm not a fan of the movie at all. I mean, they kind of ruined it. You know, the movie is like kind of more celebrity karaoke. The show itself was a lot of fun.
Hmm.
If you were um like somebody who viewed the 80s as campy and not into it, you could go and like laugh at the humor end of things. It was, you know, the humor was dirtier in the show. You could drink in your seat. The dancers were scantily clad, and you know there was lots of reasons. If you were a rocker too, the band was on stage. You could just watch the band play and just be like, yeah, cool. You know, I so people enjoyed that show for a variety of reasons. Where the movie kind of turned it into But we didn't know that. I mean, all we heard was they're making a movie and Tom Cruise is going to be in it, and like Alec Baldwin is going to be in it,
Yeah.
and Catherine Zeta-Jones. It's like, holy crap! Like, so I had a good relationship with the producers, and they were cool enough to. First, the deal was, hey, we want to put you in Arsenal in the movie and be in Tom Cruise's band. That was the fictitious band name in
Yeah.
Rock of Ages. The band is called Arsenal, and so I was, obviously really excited, went down to Miami and auditioned for it. But the assumption was, yeah, you're going to have the gig because we all want you to have the gig. And then that overlapped with Night Ranger going to Japan, the
Mm.
shooting for that. So I basically couldn't do it and was really disappointed. And then they gave me that cameo scene as like a consolation prize. Like, well, there's going to be this other scene where we're going to put some rockers in a crowd scene and you'll be singing, you won't be playing guitar. And it kind of felt like wah wah, like,
Yeah.
this is lame. But it ended up the way it panned out in the movie was none of the guys from Arsenal got any camera time at all. They were kind of silhouetted. They were never in any scenes. And
Yeah.
the cameo basically gave me a chance to go down to Miami where they shot the movie and hang out with Sebastian and Nuno, and Kevin Cronin from REO, who of
Mm.
course I already knew, and um, Debbie Gibson. So I had a great time. I mean, I went down there. The movie, like I said, not really a fan, but like had a great life experience with that and got a
Mm.
little bit of camera time on it. You can watch the movie and see me singing in the scene.
I love it. So, again, backtracking just a little bit. So you talked about the first time you got the call to do TSO. This is before you were in Whitesnake. And have you been doing TSO since then?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay, so
since 2010, I've been doing TSO. Of course, there was a schedule overlap in 2015, right when I joined Whitesnake. That was a debacle. So the juggling of gigs is never fun. When you get into it, there's always something, man. And that was basically like, joining and Whitesnake going, yeah, no problem. We'll be sensitive to that. We usually don't play in November, December anyway.
mm,
Okay, cool. The problem is that it was really Def Leppard's dates, and it was a co-headline, really, us opening, but co-headline of the UK.
mm,
And Def Leppard needed to move the dates back. So before I'd played a single show with Whitesnake, we were already like overlapped with TSO. And so I basically had to beg for a year off there and just write
mm,
like, look, I can't like leave this band not having played a show with them, having quit Night Ranger. Like I have to commit to doing this. I don't want to leave TSO at all.
mm.
That's a great gig to have. I mean, and they've always treated me great. And so basically threw myself at their mercy and said, please give me 2015 off and have me back. And hopefully we'll look back and we'll have many years and just go, oh, yeah, that's right. There was that year you missed. And turns out that's the case. And then 2020, of course, with COVID, there was just a live stream. So that really wasn't a tour. But yeah, I think I've done 13 tours with them now.
Oh wow, that's awesome. So and that's the I think most of my listeners know that TSO has I don't know what to call it, two branches, I guess. And
Yeah.
the band that you were in was also with Rosa, correct? Who's now singing for Vixen?
No, Rose is actually with the West Band.
Oh, okay, okay.
So yeah, so both bands, you're in rehearsals together and you put the show together collectively and try to keep it similar so people aren't seeing two different shows.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's going to vary slightly depending on the way people play and things like that. But we do our best to try and give everybody, no matter what. I mean, it's an amazing show. I don't care which side you go see. It's a great show where in many ways the production itself is the star, and Trans-Siberian Orchestra is known for a reason beyond the names of who plays in what band. Even in the age of social media, it's really intended to be something that just kind of continues and is I'm trying to think of the proper term for it, but I guess flexible to that. I mean, like where, I mean, Alex Skolnick certainly was a really well-known guitarist playing in it, and but it didn't take down Trans-Siberian Orchestra with Alex leaving or
Hmm.
um, taking off. So I mean, we were able to survive that. So I mean, that's understood. It is what it is when you play with Trans-Siberian Orchestra, where it's about TSO itself. It's not
Yeah.
really about me at all. Like, it's you do your best to do your best for Paul O'Neill's vision of the show, which is plenty for me. It's like I'm
Mhm.
really like super happy to be there.
Well, I mean, it is a juggernaut, and it's just transcends all people. It just is TSO,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah, exactly. That's
that's
why, man, I'm happy to be associated with it in, any capacity, really, honestly. Like,
mhm.
so yeah, I've always been thrilled to be there, and there's a reason why it's gone from 2010 to 2024 here. So,
Yeah. Now,
or
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
or
off
or
there.
25. I guess it's 2025 here. So, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I want to jump back to Whitesnake now. Not just Whitesnake, but all the bands that we've talked about. Were you fortunate enough to be jumping into these bands that you had already been a fan of, or are some of these bands that was just kind of like, oh yeah, that could be cool, and then you became a fan after joining? Like which was it?
I mean, I'd say definitely a fan. My listening tendencies as a kid were, even when I really, really liked somebody, I didn't own every cassette. They were
Hmm.
cassettes back then. I mean, I would say, Night Ranger was more of a fan of the guitarists
Hmm.
than like, hey, I love all the albums and like most US fans of Whitesnake, I was a pretty casual guy, like a casual, I guess you'd say. Like
Yeah.
I knew Slide It In, the 87 record and Slip of the Tongue.
Hmm.
That's just what US people knew of Whitesnake. I didn't know all the whole history of the UK, all the stuff that came out in the early days. Of course, when I joined, I went and listened. So
Hmm.
somewhere in between. I mean, I would say definitely a fan, but like at the same time, I didn't, I wasn't like a rock historian and knew everything from them.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get that. Now, one thing that I want to bring up, and I think this is really wild and it's cool that you did this, is you also worked with Cher. How did that come around?
That was David Coverdale needing to have knee replacement surgery in 2017. And we were kind of given the heads up, like, we're not going to tour. And me just texting a bunch of people, just saying, hey, I don't really need a new gig, but if anybody needs a sub or anything this year that you run across, like, I'm interested because Whitesnake isn't going to go out. And my friend Justin Derrico, who plays with Pink and plays on The Voice, happened to share that voice gig with Dave Barry, Cher's guitarist. And
Mhm.
they were getting busy there, and he needed somebody to fill in. And that's how that came about. I mean, Justin said, I know this is going to sound strange, but how about Joel Hoekstra from Whitesnake? And I just kind of broke it down for Dave. Like, look, man, I've done pit gigs. Like, I know how to go in and do stuff note for note. I'll play it just exactly like you. You don't have to sweat anything. Like, I'm not
Mhm.
gonna go in and just I guess shredify the share set. Like, don't worry, I'll play it down like the way it's supposed to be played. Which is basically how I did it. I mean, I just the MD music director gave me a audio recording of everything on one side and Dave on the other side,
Mhm.
including all the count offs and clicks. And they did a great job of getting me prepared. And I really worked hard to try and sound exactly like Dave on it. And that, as luck would have it, I mean, Justin got pulled out to do more or less a promo tour with Pink that year. So they really needed Dave at the Voice. And then what was supposed to just be a handful of gigs kind of turned into a few years, really, with Cher. And then that kind of went dormant as things. I knew it was kind of a bad idea. I was like, man, me full time here is very dicey because when David comes back and Whitesnake wants to go out, then I'm probably going to opt for that. No offense to playing with Cher, she's an icon, but with Whitesnake, you're on the shirt and you're
Yeah.
in something where people really care, like who the guitarist is, and
Yeah.
as opposed to a pop gig where it's, you're very replaceable on a pop gig. So
Mhm.
I was subbing out a lot. In 2019, I managed to juggle all three of those
Mm.
when Whitesnake had a big year, Cher had a big year, and TSO had a big year. And it was like, oh my God. I think that year I was on the road 285 days out of the 365.
Oh my God.
So, and Cher, to her credit, was super cool about it. I mean, she really liked having me there when I could be there during that time. And then I'd say like they were less fond of that at the very end. And then so that kind of like fell away. And I mean it probably still is a way. Like I'm probably still not like necessarily like full-time welcome back there because of all that. And but the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame thing recently, she did invite me to go play with her for her induction. And I was shocked,
Yeah.
to get the call for that because I was like, well, I haven't heard from you guys in like 5 years, but okay, like awesome, I'm in.
That's
I don't
cool.
care. You don't need to pay me or anything. I'll be there, but of course, I got paid television money and all that stuff. But I was thrilled. I was thrilled because like I hate that feeling of people being upset when you aren't available, and I don't know, just in general, like just wanting them to, I guess, uh feel good about having me around again a little bit. I mean, I was always honored to be there. I mean, playing for Cher, I get it. It's like you're playing with an icon, and
Hmm.
a great experience for me. And it also was kind of fun because it gave me a chance to step outside of like the prototypical Guitar Hero thing again and play some other styles that I've
Mm.
played in my life. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
That's all. That's cool. So now we talked a lot about all the different people that you played with and bands and stuff like that. But you were and are at least I think you still are. You're releasing solo music too. So when did you start? Putting out your own solo music along with beside working with like Night Ranger, Foreigner, Whitesnake.
Yeah, I'd say before. So the way that worked is TJ Helmrich, he had gone into heading up the recording department at Musicians Institute and was playing with some great people. He was playing with another guitar hero of mine, Brett Garsed. They released some instrumental albums together, and I just happened to be in LA when they were doing a show with drummer Virgil Donati, who's like, like not of this earth. He's like beyond incredible. And Rick Fiorabracci on bass, and same deal. These guys are like ludicrously good at their instruments. And so both of those guys said to me, uh, long story. I mean, I filled in for Brett at their sound check. Brett couldn't be there, so I did sound check for him. And then they were like, "Hey, if you ever need anybody to play on anything, let me know." And I thought, well, I've got TJ right here who could engineer Virgil playing for me and Rick playing for me, and I could make instrumental albums. And so their stuff was more along the lines of rock fusion. So
Mm.
I did two albums along those lines in 2001 and 2003. And then in 2006, I made like a fingerstyle acoustic album, but they were basically instrumental albums. And
Okay.
then all the stuff happened with Night Ranger and Rock of Ages and TSO, and the fans were buying my solo albums. And they were like, what the hell is this? I mean, they were kind of out there and a little bit more of like, I guess, like creative instrumental stuff.
Mm.
And not necessarily like we're even rocking, so they were asking, how come you don't have any solo albums that are just rock stuff? And I was like, well, I've always wanted to. So got with the guys at Frontiers and
Mhm.
talked about that, and basically decided like, well, I want to make something that sounds like a band that's more about like writing like good rock songs than showing off my guitar technique. That's like it just wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. So I started Joel Hoekstra's 13. I call those albums. That's like
Mhm.
my rock side project. And since then, I've released Dying to Live, Running Games, and Crash of Life under that. So three instrumental albums, three Joel Hoekstra's 13 albums, and I'm working on the fourth right now as we speak with that. So
Oh wow. Okay.
that's kind of become more of my solo stuff these days. And it falls in line with what I want to be doing as well. Like I'm more into doing that nowadays than I am doing like instrumental like
Mhm.
fusion or anything.
Now, do we have any kind of scheduled release date, or what are you looking at as far as getting that fourth album out?
Um, I mean, the players I have on it, Vinny Appice, he's done with the drums. Vinny's done the other three as well. And Tony Franklin is always the bassist. He's done with this
Mhm.
one. Derek Sherinian always plays the keys, and he's done. So at this point in time, it's basically down to myself getting my real guitars done. I have like scratch guitars on there to a click that to get everybody to play to.
Yeah.
And I have a kind of a unique method of a lot of times writing the vocal melody on my guitar. So I'll play like what the singer is going to be singing for them so they can hear it and have an idea of where to play fills or,
Mhm.
what the sections are going to sound like. And so the lyrics are written. I'm in the process of, I sing guide vocals then for the singers.
Mhm.
And the singers have ranged from Russell Allen and Jeff Scott Soto split the first album. Russell Allen sang the second album, and then Girish Pradhan sang the third album. And so Girish is going to do this fourth one as well.
Okay.
So he's getting started right now. That's kind of where it is. So I mean, I release date I don't know. I'm going to turn it in May.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
So speaking of, all these singers and everything that you're just threw out there, you also worked with Michael Sweet from Striper. Was that just kind of another one of those things where it just kind of fell into your lap?
Yeah, gradually, Michael was always really nice to me when he was playing with Boston. I don't know if anybody remembers, Michael was the alternate lead singer slash guitarist in Boston for a bit. There was a date where it was Night Ranger, Styx, Boston. I think Alan Parsons even on that bill. It was like it was just a 1 day big shed gig, and I got an email from Michael just out of the blue. I don't even think we talked at the gig, but he just was
Mhm.
like, "Hey, I was side of stage. I just want to let you know. I thought you played great." And I was like, "Well, dude, I've always been a huge fan. I got brought to a Striper concert before I'd heard them when I was in high school. A friend of mine brought me, and I thought they put on an incredible show, and thought they were really a talented band. And I'd had a great Oz Fox story too. And I went to GIT and I was only 19. I think I gave Oz Fox not think I did, as we all did when we were that age, gave him like a 4-track demo that I'm sure sounded horrible. I mean, I was like drum machine, me playing direct through a Roland GP8 and into it and horrible tone. And but Oz called me, and they were really quite big at the time. I mean, I think Against the Law had just come out, so they were just riding off of that. To Hell with the Devil being headlining act at big venues, and Oz
Wow.
called me and was really really nice. I mean, it was really cool. He just was like, "Hey, I listened to your demo and I just want to let you know I think you play great." And he just, was very supportive. And so I guess I had a soft spot for those guys even prior to Michael doing that. But that just proved like two nice guys, like calling me out of the blue, and then Michael writing me out of the blue. So I think we kind of started our friendship by me just being in one of his videos that I didn't even play on the album. It was one of his solo albums that he needed like a band for the video.
Mm.
So we hung for the day at the video shoot, and I just, played the song. We all went out to dinner and um, whatever, had a good time doing that. And then the next one, I think he asked me to play on a couple songs on his solo album, not write. And I did that, and we made a video for one of those called Radio, and we hung there. And then the next solo album, he asked me to actually like, write the riffs for a couple of the tunes. And so we just kind of built that. And then we were always saying, well, we should do an album together. And that kind of coincided with Nathan James, I think, talking to Frontiers at the same time about doing a solo album. And Frontiers had the idea of putting those two things together. It's like, hey, why don't we take this and Michael can sing some lead vocals and play some lead guitar, but we'll have Joel and Nathan and Michael, and that'll be the band. And the contract was kind of like, we'll figure out a drummer and a bass player later. And I was like, okay, cool. And then turns out they get Tommy Aldridge to play drums and Marco Mendoza to play bass. And I was like, oh, I see. I guess we're taking this in a Whitesnake direction here. So that project is called Iconic, and there's one album out and a second one in the works. But that's basically the history with Michael.
Well, I got to say that the Iconic album is fantastic. So I just wanted to to throw that out there. But another cool thing that you're doing is with Brandon Gibbs of Devil City Angels, and I actually saw you perform with him at the Mountain Music Festival, and you guys are great. Is Where did that come from? I mean, because I know it's an acoustic thing, and I just think that's really cool. I know you guys are coming up on the Monsters of Rock cruise and all that. So how does that start?
Yeah, Brandon and I met on the cruise. There was a period where they were combining meet and greets with artists. And so Brandon and I had the same meet and greet, and they were alternating songs from my album and Brandon's album. And I was like, hey, your stuff sounds cool, man. And, Brandon, I don't know if you've had a chance to really get to know him. He's a great guy, really, really good dude. And I forget if he texted me or called me, but he was like, hey, I sometimes do acoustic shows where I add a second guitarist. Would you be into doing that? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And this was, right in the heat of me doing everything like Whitesnake and TSO and even Cher during that time. And so we were just kind of working them in like, hey, there's a little down period for me here if you want to do something. And we would book them. And I always thought it was kind of a good move on several levels, because it was a lot of the shows I was doing were bigger, and you don't really get to like hang with the diehard fans who care about what it is you're doing
Yeah, yeah.
so much. So it was cool for that. Like, cause when Brandon and I play, it's like 100 people. It's not like 10,000 people or something. So gives you a chance to be able to hang with the people who are really actively following what you're doing. And I always thought, well, and this gives me one more avenue. I'm working with some older people, and if it comes to a point where Whitesnake isn't active or Cher's not active, then I can fill more time and do more of it. And that's exactly the way it really worked out in the end. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
the last really, I guess, 2 years since Whitesnake has really been inactive touring, Brandon and I ended up being a whole lot. I mean, we ended up, what started out as like, let's do a handful of gigs during the year in random places in the US, turned into touring Europe and touring the UK, and getting out and playing a lot of dates in the US. I mean, I have a great time with him. He's a great dude, and I think he's a great singer and guitarist, and we just get along. It's funny how you take stuff like that from having a big band with a crew and everything like that. And sometimes when it goes down to just two guys plugging in acoustic guitars and your sound check is 10 minutes long, and it's like, oh, that's it. Like that's all that's to this. Huh? Okay. This is kind of fun.
Oh, that's
So,
great.
I mean, I have a great time doing those. And likewise, I mean, I'm out right now with Broadway's Rock of Ages band, and that falls really under the same category. After the show closed, a guy licensed the name and the logo and basically took us, the band, from the show, and we just go out and we play. It's a cover band gig, basically. I mean, we just
Mm.
go out and play the songs from the show. And I thought, well, sure. I mean, I worked with these guys for 6 years. We're friends, and go out and, I have a solo in the show. I can be myself. It's not like one of those 80s bands. You got to wear like lime green spandex or something like that. And goofy sunglasses and stuff. I can, dress like I normally dress, and they say, from Whitesnake and Trans-Siberian Orchestra, etc. And so that's what I'm out doing right now. I'm actually in Texas right now. We're playing tomorrow here. We played Colorado last night.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. So this next part of the show here is called our lightning round, where I ask you a bunch of random questions. They have nothing to do with anything, and they don't matter at all. But the fans of the show like it because they feel like they're getting to know people when they come on the show for the first time. So the first question might be tough for you because it's New York or Chicago style pizza.
Both.
All
Both.
right.
Yeah, I
All right.
mean, there's something to be said for both. They're two different things.
They really are. They really are. How about do you prefer dinner or dessert?
Um, uh, Dessert,
Are we choosing a horror movie or a comedy?
comedy,
Do you prefer a beach house or a log cabin?
beach house.
All right, so if you're going through the Bermuda Triangle, you taking a boat or a plane, and why?
Either one, because I'm not really scared of that.
You're the first person that's ever said that. All right, do you have a favorite movie?
Um, I mean, I got a long list. Goodfellas usually wins out in the end. All-time classic.
That's a good one. Now, how about a favorite TV show?
Probably Family Guy.
You just killed two birds with one stone because I was going to say, do you have a favorite cartoon?
Okay, yeah, Family Guy.
All right, so that's the lightning round. And before I get you out of here, I want you to let everybody know what you got coming up next and plug all your social media so that they could follow you, find out what's going on, and come out and meet you.
Yeah, I mean, everybody can start at just joelhoekstra.com. Uh, I think my name is going to be on the screen for most, but if you're listening on audio, it's Joel, Joel, Hoekstra, Hoekstra.com. So, starting the year, I'm playing a lot of these fly dates with Broadway's Rock of Ages band in the US. I'm going to be counseling at Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp coming up March 2 through 7.
Hmm.
And they're having a Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp Hall of Fame induction on the 25th, and into which I'm being inducted.
Oh,
So
that's
if you want to
awesome.
come to the celebration for that, that's at the Whiskey on the 25th. And then let's see, beyond that, it's like I have some surprises coming that I can't really talk about, but my album, I'm going to be recording the Iconic album.
Hmm.
Revolution Saints is always in the mix as well, where I play with Dean Castronovo from Journey and Jeff Pilson from Foreigner. So more recording. There's some live stuff that can't quite talk about yet because I got to make sure it's solid and like happening, but think I have some good stuff ahead for people as well.
I gotta say, it was awesome having you here. You have such a great story, and I love the all the people that you played with and the way that it all weaves together is just incredible. So I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, dude. Well, yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks for taking the time out and thinking of me. And yeah, hopefully we'll see each other sooner than later.
Yeah, I think are you you're on the Monsters Rock cruise, right?
I am. Yeah. Oh, I should have mentioned
Yeah.
that. I'm so sorry. I'll be on the Monsters of Rock cruise as well. That's March 10 through 15, and I have my annual hangover jam on there. So free Bloody Marys. And can I swear on your show? Can I
Yep.
swear?
Yep.
Can I use the S word? So free shit between every song I give out something, and that is a tradition that people like have taken to, and they chant it as soon as the song ends. So I think they're there for free stuff more than anything, but I'll take it. It's all good.
All right. Well, I will see you there, and thank you again.
Cool, dude. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.